Hello and welcome to The Olive Tree with me, Julia Fisher. This programme is all about what God is doing in Israel and the West Bank today through the lives of believers in Jesus who live there. My guest today has lived in Jerusalem for over 30 years, but she's neither Jewish or Arab. She is German and believes she was called by God to Israel to be a bridge for reconciliation between German people and Jewish people. Her name is Christa Behr. Christa, welcome to the programme. You're sat in your house in Migdal overlooking the Sea of Galilee this morning. I'm here in South Wales, but isn't it wonderful we can talk to each other and catch up like this? So we're looking forward to hearing your story. Now, as I mentioned, you're German. So tell me about your early life in Germany and your family.
Okay, so I grew up on a farm. I have three brothers, one sister, and so my parents were gardening vegetables, and that's also what I learned as my first profession. And then as I was 18, I received the Lord, and that was a dramatic change in my life. And so then I went to a Bible school in Austria. And actually, after the Bible school, I stayed in Austria for 18 years. And I also changed my nationality. I'm now Austrian. So I lived 18 years in Germany, 18 years in Austria, and now 31 years in Israel.
Christa, why did you change your nationality from German to Austrian?
At that point, I didn't think that I would move back to Germany, but I also didn't think that I would go anywhere else. So I thought it's good to belong to something and to some country. And actually, it worked out very well for me because I went many years to former communist countries. And as an Austrian, I didn't need a visa to visit these countries like Hungary and Romania. And if I would have a German passport, I would have needed a visa. So I went actually from 1986 to 1991 every month to Hungary and to Romania.
Now, you had become a Christian by that point, but you say that it was quite a dramatic time in your life when you became a believer. What did your family think about that?
My background is the Lutheran Church, and my parents believe in Jesus, but I was a little bit too extreme for them. So maybe I wasn't so wise how to talk about the faith, but it was good that I really wanted to serve the Lord with all of my heart. And later on, they understood me better. But in the beginning, it was a little hard for them that I wanted to preach everywhere. And Jesus had become the love of my life. And that was very obvious.
Now, you became a teacher.
Yes, I visited this Bible school. And what I didn't know is that as I finished the school, I'm not only have studied the Bible, I was a Lutheran religion teacher for public schools in Austria. And that's what I did 11 years. I was teaching full time and the last years half time. And I was working in youth work in the Lutheran Church in Salzburg.
When did you first visit Israel?
1977 for 1 week. And it was actually funny. I was the Lutheran religion teacher in the village. And the Catholic priest, he said he wants to visit the holy city of Rome. And because I was a Lutheran, I said to him, "Oh, if you visit once the holy city of Jerusalem, I'm joining you." And then he said, "Oh, what do you not say? I have an invitation to go to Israel." And so I went 1977 with the Catholic Bible Society for the first time to Israel for 1 week. And it made a very deep impression on me.
Tell me what it's like as a German, or Austrian as you had become, learning about Israel from a historical point of view. What was going on in your mind?
Yes, that actually happened through a lecture my former counselor, Otto Siegfried von Bibra, gave about Israel's past, present, and future. And he also said in this lecture that whoever is touching Israel is touching the apple of God's eye. It's from the prophet Zechariah, a scripture. And as I heard this, I understood that my nation did not only sin against Israel, we also sinned against the God of Israel. And in touching and destroying Israel, we are touching God right into his most sensitive point, to his eye. And I started to weep. And because I understood, if I like it or not, I'm a German and I have to face it. And by the way, Austria is in the same boat. Hitler was an Austrian, and a lot of Nazis were Austrians. So in this, being an Austrian or German, it doesn't matter. We are together in this history.
You're almost describing a sense of personal responsibility for what had happened during the war. Is that how you felt? Was there a heaviness about it?
Maybe I couldn't describe in the beginning what it is that made me weep about it. But of course, I haven't lived in that time. I'm born after the war. But I do think that we have also, as people who were born after the war, we have to take a responsibility in dealing with the past so that we are not condemning ourselves to repeat it in the future. If we are not learning out of history, we are in great danger to repeat what our nation did before. So it's not a question of personal guilt, but it's a question of a priestly position as a believer to stand in the gap for your nation, and knowing that if we would have lived in that time, it's a big question if we would have been behaved better, because it was a time of dictatorship and it could have cost everything to stand against a dictator.
Did you have anybody to talk to about these thoughts that you were having at that time, or did you feel quite alone?
I think I was quite alone, but I actually wrote this lecture down and I started to give myself this lecture. I remember I spoke once for students on the university, and there were three doctors from Tel Aviv. They saw that and they joined us in the meeting, and they were positive impressed what I had to say about Israel. And but I did find afterwards other friends who have an understanding for Israel. But in the very beginning, I was alone.
You then went back to Israel a few years later. Things
Yes,
were starting to develop.
you're right. Always had the desire to come back after this short visit with people I know, and that's what I did 1981, so 4 years later. And at that journey, I felt that God was calling me to move to Israel. It was a very strong sense that I was supposed to move to Israel and that it would be related to building bridges between Israel and the church in the nation. It was so strong that I shared it with a sister who was also on the journey. And I said, but I don't understand. I just moved to Salzburg and I know it's from the Lord. And then she said, give it back to the Lord. And if it is from him, it will come again. And that's what I did. I actually almost forgot about it. And after 4 years, 1984, it came back. And then 1988, I went for the third time to Israel.
It's a very big step to move, to say, I'm going to go and live in Israel. You must have been
Right.
very sure.
I actually, from the time I got a call to go to Israel and that I really moved to Jerusalem, it was exactly 10 years. And from 88, I came 89 and 1990, many times, altogether 4 months. And I really checked it out where I would like to live in Jerusalem or in the Galil. And I prayed with my friends in Austria, in Hungary, in Israel. And then I wanted to move to Israel exactly on the 15th of January, 1991. But this was the date where the Gulf War started and no airplane was going. So I was stuck in Austria. Also, my apartment was not ready for a war situation. But I asked in prayer if a family would take me in and if I would have the money for the flight, that I would go during the war, and both happened. So I went to Israel during the Gulf War on the 20th of February, 1991. And on the 28th of February, the war stopped. So I had 1 week of war experience with gas mask and running into the sealed room when the rockets came. And I had more peace in Israel as in Austria because I knew that I was at the place where I was supposed to be.
That's so interesting. Christa, we've heard about your early life. We're going to come on and hear about what happened, how you bought a house. But for now, thank you for sharing your story. The Olive Tree Reconciliation Fund is a Christian charity based in the UK that supports the needs of both Jewish believers and Arab or Palestinian Christians living in Israel and the wider Middle East. If you'd like to know more about our work and receive our free bi-monthly newsletter, please visit our website, olivetreefund.org. Meanwhile, join me at the same time next week for another story from the Olive Tree. Until then, goodbye.